Hello viewer, welcome to History and Government Form 3. This is lesson 3 with Mr. John Gatumo. In our previous lesson, we were able to discuss the method that were used by European power to acquire the colonies. And this method that they were using to acquire the colonies, I gave you some assignment to go and try at home, and we want to use this lesson to discuss these questions together. These questions were, you attempt this question, you outline 3 methods that were used to acquire colonies in Africa. So the method that were used to acquire the colonies in Africa, so the Europeans power used signing of treaty as a method to acquire the colonies. And the signing of treaty, this is where they could sign some agreement with the African leaders. And this agreement, or rather the pact, it was for protection purposes. Most of them were protection purposes. And therefore they used this one as a method to acquire the colonies in Africa. Another method is the military conquest. And in the military conquest, this is the method whereby they used their own trained military soldiers. And these military soldiers, they are the one who could suppress the communities which are resisting. So this method was most applicable in the communities that were resisting. Example of the community that were resisting, they are such as Nandi community. They resisted for a long period of time. We have in Tanganyika, resisting against the Germans, that is the Maji rebellion, among many others. So among the communities that were not ready to accept the Europeans, they used this method of military conquest. So this basically, they are the method that I wanted you to give in this particular question. So in today's lesson, we shall continue on the chapter 1, that is the Europeans' invasion of Africa and the process of colonization. So we shall deal with subtopic, that is factors that led to the scramble and partition of colonies in Africa. Factors that led to the scramble and partitioning in Africa. So these factors that led to the scramble for the colonies, they are actually the reason that made the Europeans to come all the way from Europe to come and occupy Africa. And we say that the scramble, this is where they struggle for one thing, or rather for a scarce thing. So in Africa, there are the colonies. And these colonies, the European nation, they found some interest on them. So we shall discuss the factors that led to the scramble for colonies in Africa. So these factors include 1, the need for the market. So there was a need for the market. So they came to Africa to get the market for their finished goods. Remember, in Europe, they had the Industrial Revolution. An Industrial Revolution, that is in the 18th century, saw the rising of so many companies and factories. And therefore, these factories, they needed the raw materials. They needed the market, the people who can buy their final product that they have manufactured. So the only place to get this market was in Africa. And this is the main reason why they came to Africa to scramble for the colonies. Number 2 is the militarism. European countries wanted to make their armies popular than others. They wanted their own armies, or rather their own troops, to become more popular than others. And the reason to make, or rather the only way to make their armies more popular than others, is by conquering so many countries. And remember, there was this attitude in European nation, and this was that a country was more superior than other when they occupy more colonies. And therefore they came in Africa, they conquered the resisting community, and therefore they took that colonies to be their own. Another reason, or another factor that led to the scramble for colonies in Africa was to spread Christianity. And the missionaries wanted to stop Islam. they came to Africa to counter the spread of the Islamic religion. Remember, initially, through the trade, they had came in Africa, and therefore they had converted Africans into Islam. And the Islam was spreading at a very high rate. And the missionaries, they came from Europe to come and spread their religion. Remember, the Europeans regarded their culture, that is religion, to be more superior than other. And therefore, they came to Africa so that they can spread their religion in their own colonies. Fourth, it was to settle surplus population. All the excess population was settled in Africa. As a result of the Industrial Revolution, it is so machine replacing the human labor. And therefore, this caused the migration from rural to urban centers. In urban centers, there was a lot of crime rates that increased in this area. And as a result of this, there were so many, or rather, a skyrocketing population, or rather, the number of people increased in this region. And therefore, the Europe could not accommodate all this population. So the excess population was taken to Africa. Another reason, it is the Europeans lost America territory. And they lost the America territory on 4th of July, 1776. This is when the USA, as the country, gained its own internal independence. And when they gained internal independence on July 4th, 1776, they turned to Africa to increase their political influence. Remember, the Europeans, they are the one who had founded the new land, and the new land is America. This is as a result of the explorers such as the Christopher Columbus coming all the way from Europe and discovering the new territory, that is America. So since the discovery, they had the political influence in America, and therefore the America fought for their own independence, and they managed to secure their independence on July 4th, 1776. So this was the main reason why they turned to Africa to scramble for the colonies in Africa, so that they can increase their political. Another one is the rise of nationalism in Europe. And the nationalism is that process whereby a country tries to extend its colonies, or rather to extend its mandate. So in Europe, there was a rise of nationalism. And in nationalism, countries in Europe, they considered themselves to be more superior, such that even their culture was considered as superior to the Africa. And therefore, they wanted to go and spread the nationalism, or rather to spread their superiority by conquering. So a country in Europe was considered to be more superior than another. So nations felt more superior if they acquire more colonies overseas, or rather outside Europe. Example of these countries, we have Italy and Germany, the countries in Europe that actually wanted to gain their own, or rather to get their own colonies. So by 1870, Britain and France were most powerful states in Europe. And the fact that it was most powerful in Europe by 1870, Germany was able to fight against France, being powerful, in a Franco-Prussian War. And the Franco-Prussian War was in 1870. So Germany fought France and defeated her in 1870 during the Franco-Prussian War. Franco is the war between France and Prussia, that is the German. The German, after defeating France, took her provinces, and these provinces were so fertile, or rather the rich provinces. And these provinces are such as the Alsace and Lorraine. Lorraine belonged to France, and therefore the German, when they defeated France, they were able to capture these two main provinces. So the France, because they lost this, they wanted to compensate this loss by acquiring more colonies in Africa. And you will see France, it went all the way to West Africa, and they conquered a majority of these colonies in Africa. So this was the reason why they came to Africa to scramble for their independence. So you can see the representation of these countries in Europe that actually consider themselves to be more superior than others. Another reason or the factors for scramble for the partitioning colonies in Africa was availability of raw materials needed for the industries. In Africa, you can see in my illustration, in Africa, they had discovered through the trade that they were engaging before them extending their imperialism. So the imperialists in Europe, they discovered that in Africa is full of raw materials, and therefore these raw materials included such as the gold, silver, diamond, and labor. The raw materials were so many that were needed in the industries. Remember, in Europe, they had the Industrial Revolution, and in the Industrial Revolution, these industries, they needed the raw material to process, to make them the raw, or rather the finished products. You can see them coming to take every region. These countries, through their kings, their leaders, they were able to secure Africa, and they divided Africa. They divided Africa in such a manner that these countries in Europe, they were able to take its stake. This led to the partitioning of Africa. Gold was the main, or rather was available along the river banks in Africa. Gold was one of the precious metal, and it was needed in the industries, and therefore they came to Africa to secure this precious metal that was found along the river banks in Africa. Summary for the economic factors for the imperialism in Africa. The economic motive for the Europeans to come in Africa was they came as the industrialized nation. They sought for the raw material, as we summarize the economic factors, the neutral resources, cheap labor, that is a slave. We have new market. They wanted to search for the new markets for their manufactured products, or rather manufactured goods. Another reason for European coming to Africa to acquire the colonies was humanitarian factor. So humanitarian in Europe campaigned against the slavery, and this humanitarian campaign was actually instigated by the Europeans economists such as the Smith. You see, Smith came up. Adam Smith was an economist in Europe, and he came up with this theory that a free labor is even more productive than the other. So this fact, among many other, it led to Europeans. They campaigned against the slavery. So they came to Africa so that they can be able to stop slavery, which was actually a trading activity that was taking place in Europe, and therefore they replaced with legitimate trade. The humanitarian factors, they came to stop the slavery, and this campaign emerged which proposed that abolition of slave cannot occur unless the Europeans occupy areas where there was slave trade. So unless the Europeans take place this region, there is no way that the slave trade will occur. And therefore, to fulfill their main objective of stopping the slavery, they had to occupy the colonies in Africa. Another reason is the Egyptian, or rather the Egyptian question, Egypt question. In Egypt, there was also an interest because it was located at the Horn of Africa. And being located at the Horn of Africa, the Cairo was actually adjusted to the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. So all the way to the east, far east, going to the colonies in India. And therefore the Europeans, such as the Britain, they were able to come in Egypt because they wanted to access their enforcement or in India, that is in Gao. So Egyptian question was another reason for them coming. We shall discuss this later. So the Congo crisis, there was Democratic Republic of Congo was another actually aspect that led to a scramble for partitioning of Africa. So the Europeans' power, they had established the Congo colony because of the places where there was the mineral resources. And the France, they had an interest in this region, and so to the Belgium, and also the British. The two places or two provinces, that is the Kivu and the Shaba, it was a place where there was these raw materials. And therefore, the France, through the Brazzaville, they were able to come to this place so that they can explore the region. The British, they had an interest because this region was, there was the raw materials. And the small countries in Europe, that is the Belgium, through the Leopold II of Belgium, they were able to come in Congo so that they can explore this region. And he sent the Henry Morton Stanley to come and establish these areas. So therefore, this is the main cause of the call for the Berlin Conference, so that because the three countries, they have come in one region that they both have an interest, and therefore to reduce the conflict, the magnitude of the conflict between or among these nations, they had to call for a conference in Berlin. We shall discuss them. The Otto von Bismarck, he called a conference, and therefore this conference was to solve this dispute. On the Egyptian question, in Egypt in Africa attracted the Britain and France. The France had occupied Egypt, but later Britain took control after suppressing a revolt in 1882 in Egypt. So the France, they had occupied this region, and therefore they had constructed the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal, it was completed in 1869, and the British, being one of the superpower, they wanted the compression of this canal, because it was one of the means of transport. And therefore, they gave some loan to the king in Egypt, that is the Khedive Ismail. The Khedive Ismail was given some loan by the British because they had an interest in the region. And therefore, the event when Khedive Ismail died, his son actually took over after him. And therefore, this leader, he was like a puppet to the British, or rather to the European nation. And France, because it was defeated, the Britain defeated France in a war that took place, and it was able to take Egypt so that they can get the way to India, the colonies that belong to the Britain. Remember, in India, there was an raw material such as the opium that was heavily needed by the Britain, and therefore they had to fight against the France. France was defeated when it was in North Africa, stopping a revolt, and therefore Britain took over the region. So after the France was defeated by the Britain to take Egypt, France turned her attention to west of Africa, And when it went to Africa, to west of Africa, it took several colonies. So this led to France occupying most of West Africa. To summarize on the Congo crisis, Belgium and Portugal were competing over the control of Congo. So following the France defeat in Egypt, it turned to Congo. So therefore, these countries, they were all interested nations, and it led to the call for the Berlin Conference that was held. It was called by the Otto von Bismarck so that it can solve this problem. So Belgium, Portugal, Britain, and France, they want to take control of Congo. But again, in Berlin Conference, it solved all this dispute that was looming. And you will see one of the terms of Berlin Conference, it is stated that the Belgium was given the mandate to control, or rather to navigate, Congo. This is because Belgium was one of the smallest countries in Europe, and Leopold II, being its leader, was given the mandate to control Congo. We shall discuss this later in this lesson. As we wind up the lesson today, I want to give you some assignment to go and try at home, so that in the next lesson we shall be able to pick from there and discuss the question in detail. So this question is, you outline 3 factors that led to scramble for colonies in Africa. We have discussed these factors. So it is up to you. You go and answer this question. Do your thorough research on the same, so that in the next lesson we shall be able to explore the answers for this. Thank you for following this lesson, that is the History and Government Form 3. You can always get this and many more in Elimu TV. You watch Elimu TV and learn. So you can SMS us through the number, mobile number, through our number 40007. That is 40007. In our Facebook page, you can get us at Elimu TV.